commercials.
If you do the wrong way with the wrong intentions, I say quiet hiring is not going to work. And when I reflect back, I felt like, you know what, that was a wage theft. Why do you need to come back, right? Micromanagers are like, I need to literally watch. You got to understand the environment and see if there's something you can do, self-reflect. So by 90 days, I figured it out, self-reflected, what's working, what's not working. And the reality was completely different. If you Google whitening resume, a lot of people are concerned about it. If you want extra from me, what's in for me? I'm going to go somewhere that I am celebrated. Hello. How are you all? Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Sweta Ragni joining live from Canada. I have an awesome guest right now. For people who are listening to me on audio live right now, please just let me know, thumbs up right there on audio live that you can hear us. And this is being streamed. Wow, there are like 77 people joining in. This is going to be awesome. I have amazing certified resume writer, ex-journalist and communication manager back then joining me. And we are going to talk about executive resume. What is executive presence and how are you going to stand out and how are you going to put the content together? We're going to talk about this today and we are going to take Q&A a little bit later on. Hear us. If you want to see the sample of bits and pieces, I would highly recommend you to go to my YouTube channel right now, Teach and Do, and we'll showcase the samples. Virginia is going to take you. There are a couple of slides she put it together, and she's going to share those samples as well. Go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Teach and Do, and you can also watch the replay as well a little bit later on for audio audience, okay? I'm going to go off the camera. Virginia is already in audio live. As you can see her right there, I'm going to give her a stage. Virginia, tell us where you're joining us from. Who are you?
Hi, Sweta. Thank you so much for having me. Gosh, you and I have known each other for several years, but this is my first time speaking to your amazing group. Who am I? I am a child of immigrants. My family moved from Latin America when I was a baby. I was raised in the US and I live in North Carolina right now. On the career front, I have been writing resumes for a million years for free. I didn't know that anyone did them for a living. So I used my degree in journalism to write for newspapers and magazines and companies and websites. And then in 2008, I made it official and I became a paid professional resume writer. And I have grown my business since then.
Oh my God, that is amazing. So can you hear us? Give me thumbs up. I was not able to see it on audio live. Give me thumbs up on audio live. Perfect. If you're joining from Canada, give me heart emojis right there. I would love to give you a shout out. Heart emojis, all the Canadian people in the house. I'm scrolling it down. You are seeing this on YouTube and right there, Emmer. All right. So there, Dan, welcome to my show. There are a couple of people that they're regular. Thank you so much for joining in. Anyone watching us or joining us on the stage from States, give me heart emojis. I would love to see people from Canada and US coming up on the stage later on, especially if you have any questions about the resume. Let me know. I'm going to go quickly to the YouTube as well, just to see everything is fine. Do the sound check. About the resume. All right. Perfect. Virginia, thank you so much for joining in. Who better than ex-journalist and know what she's talking about? And I know that in the past you've managed a team as well. So I know when I'm bringing the guest, I do have vetted guest and certified person who knows what she's talking about. So let me ask you one question. Do you think there's an executive presence when it comes to executive resume writing skills?
Absolutely. The way you need to present yourself when you are targeting the executive suite or you're in it is very different than how you position yourself when you are certainly right in the early stages of your career and when you're in the middle management. I always liken it to showing that you're a big picture strategist versus someone who can execute that strategy.
That is great. So let's dive right into it. Anyone executive right now, senior leadership, give me heart emojis. Give me heart emojis and audio live right there. Anyone on that right now trying to bounce back, having challenges, talking about yourself, bragging about yourself? How do you even begin? Give me heart emojis. There are a lot of people tuning in. Chad right there, Morgan right there. There are a lot of people here tuning in. All right. All right. Smita. All right. It's perfect. So, Virginia, when you are, let's say, when someone reaches out to you and they say, I'm an executive, I have no clue. How do you start? Like, how do you start this intake meeting? What are the questions that you ask before you even start writing a resume for them? Walk us through.
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. So the first thing that I do when before even sort of deciding whether I'm going to work with someone is I make sure that they are clear on their target. So that is certainly they need to be clear on what role they're targeting. Ideally, they have a sense for the industries they want to target and sort of the size of the company that they want to target next, because all of that informs how I write. When someone has clarity, then we get to work. And if they don't, I refer them to several people in our industry that is what they specialize in, helping people figure out what sort of lies at that intersection of what I like to do that I'm also good at, that pays me what I want to be paid and sort of meets all of my non-negotiables. Once we get started, I ask to see links to a handful of job postings of interest, because job postings are your treasure map as to what the hiring managers want to see. And when you review 5 or 6 of them, more often than not, there's common phrasing, there's common words and terminology. And when you see it over and over again, that's your telltale sign that that's what they're looking for. Especially once you scroll down towards the bottom of the job postings, a lot of times you'll see that the job posting starts off where they say, this is our company and this is what we do and this is what the department is and this is what the role is. But then you'll see a section that says these are our must-haves and then these are sort of our nice-to-haves. So, they'll say required or preferred. That bottom section is what I pay a ton of attention to. But then when I am walking through someone's career story, I sort of, in my head, I'm sort of playing one of those before after design shows in my head. So I like to understand why did you take this role? What was the task being asked of you? Flash forward to today, or, at the end of that job, what did things look like when you left? And what was your role in helping things get from point A to point B? Then the other thing I always want to make sure to ask is, when you reflect back, what are you proudest of? What do you feel like you learned? And what would people say about you? The answer to all of those questions and that story, that is what I'm writing about. And what that does is it enables you to write a resume that is very achievement or accomplishment focused versus, these were the duties of my job.
That is great.
And it takes like an hour and a half to do that whole story. It takes quite a while.
Perfect. Now, can you walk us through what do you mean by career clarity is the key when you start writing resume, and why do you feel like it's a necessity right there before you even start applying for the role?
So if you are really torn on what you want to do next, let's say you say, I either want to be let's say someone's in HR and they say, I either want to focus on learning and development or I want to do compensation and benefits. Those are 2 very different roles within HR, and how I would write about them is very different. How you write about someone who is leading finance is very different than someone that's leading operations. Sales is different. Front end stuff is different than back end stuff because your success is based on different factors. And so being clear on what you want to target allows me to write with that lens in mind. Otherwise, if you say, I can do all these things and I just need to put it on my resume, and then someone will look at it and they'll be able to figure out where I'd be a good fit. It doesn't work that way. People need that information spoon-fed to them, especially when they're looking at hundreds of resumes. They don't have time to look at yours and say, oh, I think he can do this based on this experience, but I'm not really sure what kind of role he's after. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're on
Okay.
the same page. We're totally aligned on that. I do the same as well. I'm not a clarity coach, and sometimes that involves a lot of counseling and vetting the career path, and that's out of scope for my program as well. So I do the same thing as well. If I am not able to find that, let's say, balance between you and I, and if I'm writing a resume for you, then I would refer you to someone else who can counsel you first and be very clear on what you want. When I'm taking in for resume writing, the number one is, are you qualified for the role? Do you meet the requirements, right? And then the other one is, are you clear on the targeted title? Have you vetted that out yourself? What are the hard skills and soft skills based on the targeted requirement? And also the industry as well. And yes, sometimes some of the industry, the transferable skills are there and you can pivot from one industry to the other one, but that might not be the thing when it comes to writing the executive resume. Now, let's go with the framework when it comes to resume writing. And I wanted to put it out there. There's a disclaimer, right? Every resume writer out there, they have their own writing style and own
Yeah.
research and everything. There's their own clientele. I normally work with the newcomers and immigrants in Canada and US who are not able to bounce back for whatever reason. And I really work with them in a leadership and executive as well. And Virginia, what are the what kind of clientele that you have that you've been working currently and then worked in the past?
I tend to work with people that have really complex stories to tell. Usually it's because they have worked for many, many years, and they are either looking to make a change or their story is they've taken lots of different roles in similar companies, and it's a very complicated thing to explain. And when you have 30 years of experience to call back on, how to pick and choose what's relevant, that's a challenge. So that tends to be who I work with. Recognizing that your audience is a lot of newcomers, I did share in the screenshots that I sent with you two snippets of information that I know or challenges that I know are common to immigrants, the language barriers for many, and then just sort of explaining, look, I did all of this in my native country. I need to show you that I am equipped to hit the ground running here in Canada. And so I have a couple of examples where I address those very things in specifically it was for US immigrants, but I think it applies to your groups as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to share that for those of us just joining in on audio live right now. This is being streamed on YouTube channel as well, Teach and Do. You can subscribe to that channel and you can also watch the replay. If you go to event details page there's a three button on top on a live on audio. You can go and see the event detail, and then there is the Teach and Do, a video as well. And we're going to share some of the samples where Virginia has graciously provided us. And we're going to go line by line. What are the standards? So I really liked how you brought that up, right? And this is the problem that I normally deal with it. I wouldn't say it's a problem, but the challenges a lot of people in the
Hmm.
executive role, they deal with it is, I want to showcase like 40 years talent in there. I want to put everything, and I work with them. And sometimes I have to put my foot down and say, no, this is not going to happen. Right. And I think sometimes there's a balance between being, let's say, showcasing everything that you've ever done, how you came into that level, executive level, what are the relevant informations. And it's always focusing back to the job posting. Some of the executive thing that I've seen in job postings, a requirement I've seen it is they might want 15 to 20 years of expertise on it. And some might want, let's say, 10 years of experience on it, right? And there comes the thin line is there, being overqualified sometimes, and ageism is there as well when it comes to executive. What are your thoughts on it? How should one balance that out when it comes to resume writing, story? Like when you're writing the story, what exactly you would do to make sure that you find the balance and they're not considered overqualified, outdated, and maybe
Yeah.
they're treated out as, hey, like you're too old, right? Like, how do you mitigate that risk?
So the ways that you address the outdated and old is that you make your resume timeless. Nobody needs to know if we are 35 or 85. And what I do to accomplish that for the good thing about being most the good thing about targeting executive roles is no one expects you to be 22 years old, right?
Mhm.
They expect that you have 10 to 15 years of experience under your belt. So I focus on what has transpired in the last 15 years in terms of giving a lot of detail, including the dates. Then I will create an earlier experience section where I pick and choose the information from your earlier career that is relevant. Sometimes what's relevant is the names of the places that you worked at. Sometimes it's the titles that you held because you want to show that you sort of learned an industry or a function from the ground up. Sometimes it was a big specific win that you could highlight in one or two lines, but you put that in the earlier experience section and you remove the dates from it. And that creates, it takes a very small amount of space, but it allows you to include what is relevant to your target. The other thing I'll add is if something really important happened back prior to those 15 years, I often will reference it somehow in the summary at the very top. Recognizing the age discrimination piece, the other thing that, and I mentioned this in another group yesterday, when you are of a certain age, I'm of that certain age, the two biases that we often face are that we are not tech savvy, that we don't adapt well to tech and other kinds of change, and that we think we know it all and don't play well with others. And so what you can do to overcome those two things is in your writing, you can address the tech savviness by number one, having a fresh and modern format that can be read. That means your resume can be read just as easily on your phone as if someone prints it out. You include your LinkedIn URL on your contact information. That little bit of detail can make an impression. You don't have an email that says AOL on it. And then if there are certain softwares that are relevant to your job, you reference those. You also want to make sure that your resume shows instances where you adapted or supported adaptation or helped lead a turnaround or help people embrace change. So that overcomes the savviness piece. How you address that you don't play with others and you think you're a know-it-all is that you introduce language in your bullets that says things like partnered with, collaborated with, member of senior leadership team that did this. You weave that in together with other bullets that say that you led something, that you directed something. And so then you're showing that you go over things on your own, but you also can do it as part of a group. And that cuts the biases off, cuts off the head of that.
That is great segue for dealing with how do you become an executive? How do you showcase the executive presence by showcasing that you have updated your skills just because you've been working in the environment for more than 30 years? That does not mean that you're outdated. So showcase that. What are the tools that you're using it? What are the tools that your targeted industry is requiring, and communicate that. And one of the things that when I'm dealing with the people from outside who are immigrating to Canada or US, they're still stuck in their kind of tools back home. So they really need to showcase that, how those tools would transition into the tools when you're moving to the different country, and maybe try to seek the understanding when you're writing a resume. And maybe sometimes you need to get rid of those, and owning everything from 30 years before, like 15 years before, that's not relevant is the key. Now, let's start with the top sections on it. I'm going to showcase some example. There's a screen. I'm sharing it on YouTube. You can go and see it later on as well on YouTube. So I'm going to share that, Virginia. We're going to go one by one here. Yes, I'm on slide one. Go on. Yes.
And if you've been published, those sorts of details, when you showcase it right at the top, immediately makes the reader think, okay, this person is a little bit more senior. So in that example, the person had been at he wasn't an executive he wanted to be, but he was on the speaking circuit in this cybersecurity world, and so we made sure to reference that.
Okay, so I'm going to add that quickly in there because what's happening right now, what may happen is they might not be able to hear you on YouTube because of the third-party tool that I'm using it.
Oh, gotcha.
Quickly,
Okay.
I just did it. So you said it. I'm going to quickly pull that screen, slide number 1, quickly for our viewers on YouTube channel to take a look at it. All right, this is what she's talking about. When you look at it, this is something that we all design it separately. Just want to make sure that you all know there's no one size fits all. We all have our own creativity on it.
This was a guy who was targeting a chief information security officer role, and we wrote just one liner in the summary at the top that said, remain current on trends and regulations as a conference panelist and member of multiple software advisory boards. Boom, that one. And then I explain it on page 2 of the resume, but that one little bullet connotes or denotes a level of leadership that he didn't have.
Okay, I'm going to share that again just so that people can see it. All right, so here's the slide number 1, and she is crafted, and then she put a very clear title in there, and then there are some keywords as well. There's a strategy we put it through as a resume writer. So it's not only about content, but ending up on a recruiter search when they're looking for a resume like this internally. If you're already on their ATS system, there's so much work that goes behind it. So now I'm going to go to slide number 2, Virginia, quickly talk about it, and then I'm going to showcase that slide number 2 when you're done talking.
Okay, so slide number 2 is it a COO one?
Let's see here. Yeah, no worries. Chief Sales Revenue Officer.
Okay, let me scroll down to that one. Okay, so the point that I wanted to show with that the example is that it's really important to show your scope and your purview, as well as sort of quantify your results. So showing your scope and purview means, as a leader, you want to speak to how many people are in your total organization, not just your directs. Where applicable, list the title of your boss, especially if it's impressive. So like if you report to the CEO or the chief, what's the other word? The president, that also sort of connotes a level of leadership. You want to share your P&L or your budget. Sharing that scope, and this in the sample that that you're showing on YouTube, I actually reference the size of the team and the size of the P&L right at the top. But then in the actual experience, I have a lot of details that show the scope, his size of his specific team, the budget that he was given, the size of a big project that he led. And then I also show some growth stats in there.
Okay, I'm going to stream that. I'm going to add that,
yeah.
Virginia. You can, so I'm going to add that on YouTube for our viewers to see what she's talking about. I don't want to lose her voice because I'm streaming an audio and YouTube both. So I want to make sure that she talks about it. And after that, I'm going to showcase her sample here on a YouTube right here. I'm going to add that. So she's talking about this right there. Look at this, how beautifully.
$25 to $600 million P&L leadership. And then in his experience, at the very top, if the reader doesn't even go into it doesn't go down to read the bullets, you immediately know how big the company is, how big his strategy was, how big his team was, what does P&L look like. Some information that is really helpful to gather before you get started writing your story to show that those details are annual and quarter revenues, if you can get them, growth forecast. Taken on or entered into new markets or into new countries? Has there been associate or employee growth? Have there been more users before versus after? So measuring all of those things, even if you are not specifically responsible for those growth, can show that you contributed to that story. And in an executive role, you want to show that you understand the role that your little world plays in the bigger picture for the company.
That's great. So we're going to move on to the slide number 3. You can talk about it, and I'm going to stream that on our YouTube as well. So what does the slide 3 look like?
Okay, so that is
President and CEO.
So with that one, the other one thing that I think is really helpful when someone is targeting that executive role is to sort of reference what your values are. It might be that you're talking about your approach to leadership. It might be that you are working at a company that really cares about career advancement is really important, and so you want to sort of reference how you help advance people. And this example that I use, for this person, DEI was really important. I think when I first wrote it, it was still D and I. So I know that term has evolved, but I made sure right at the top in the summary that I wrote, maintain D&I as a core team building principle as a multilingual, multinational citizen of US and I forget where this person was from, US and the EU. So that just that little snippet shows sort of what kinds of things are important to this person. When you are talking about your values and how you lead, you want to think through, what did morale look like when you got there to what it's like now? Have you contributed to promotions? Have you helped us to deal with attrition or support retention? Did you build a team, or did you revitalize one that was sort of a hot mess? Think about your team's before and after reputation within your organization. Was it siloed when you first started and now it's collaborative? Was your organization sort of an order taker and now you're considered a business partner to other people? Do you have a voice at the leadership table? Those sorts of details are what people expect in someone that is at the executive level or targeting it, and so they're really important to include.
That is great, Andy. Good to see you. Anyone joining us from Canada, give me heart emojis, and States as well, give me heart emojis and audio live. I'm going to open Q&A a little bit later on after showcasing the sample. You got the valid point there. So why DEI is really important on the executive resume right now. And again, even if there's no ask for it, it's really good to talk about it, put it out there, because you're responsible for leading those teams and making sure there's inclusion. Everything is there, but you got to talk about it. Do not assume they don't want it, right? And one thing that I want to point it out is when I'm working with I don't write the resume anymore. I teach them how to write it. I know they can do way better job than me, for sure. Like when it comes to executive, I want them to write it. So I teach them how to write the resume by showcasing the executive presence. So in my world in Canada, so when I'm taking in clients, let's say if they're executive back home, and what's happening here is there's like flat hierarchy. Like a lot of organizations, it's not like, bureaucracy here. There's no structure. Like there's a flat hierarchy. It's really hard sometimes when I'm talking about what kind of team you're managing, how many teams you have. Some people are doing more than they're expected to do. So then what they do is when I'm asking them, what team have you managed? They're like, I've managed marketing, I've managed supply chain, I've managed this, 10 teams. That doesn't happen a lot in Canada, right? And yes, you have a team, but you really have a team. If you're in marketing, you're only managing people, folks from marketing normally, not like out of the world supply chain or a different, So I think this is where when you're looking for the right role, when you're moving into the different country, you really have to vet out the hierarchy. What kind of organization, who does it report to, what kind of budget you'd be managing? Can you translate that from back home experience? Also, the direct reports matter as well, and indirect reporting line matters. And if you manage any outsourcing team as well matters. The vendor management matters as well. And you will have to vet it out. Are you going to be managing vendor? Are you going to be leading an outsourcing team? Because there's going to be a lot of outsourcing. There are people who are in Spain. Do you know the language? So there are things that you want to put it out there as an executive. Sometimes it's not about I know it all. I don't know, Virginia, what do you think?
I agree. Well, and one thing I was thinking about what you just said, that you're right. In a lot of other countries, you're wearing many, many hats. And that's not unlike the startup world here or the private equity backed world here. And so if that's a talent of yours, maybe you target an organization that is not super super big and really siloed where it can be hard to do that. That's a big strength, and it might be valued in a place where they need you to wear lots of hats.
That is great, right? And that's when I have to, and then I would tell them like they would want me to list everything. And I would tell them like this is where I put my foot down and say, well, you know what, I'm not going to do that, right? Because you pay me not to be a yes ma'am. Sometimes it's hard to deal with the executive, to be honest. Type A personality. I love working with them, but they want what they want. And us as a career strategist, resume writer, resume strategist, whatever you call yourself, sometimes we have to call it out and say, this is not going to work because it's not
Depends
about
on what
us,
they're targeting, right?
right? And we have to like,
yeah.
that's why we have to understand the market. We have to be able to sometime honestly fire a client. Have you done that, Virginia, when you feel like, well, I can't deal with it?
I've done a couple, but I always say that's why I ask to see jobs of interest, because if you're sending me a bunch of startups where they say they want somebody who could jump in and support big growth and wear a bunch of hats, then you do get to put a lot of that good stuff in there. But if you want to say, I want to be a financial planning and analysis executive for this manufacturing company, then if you did all these other things, you maybe can have one little line that references it, but it doesn't add value to the target.
That is great. So we're going to talk about now. I'm going to talk about the next slide. You can talk about it, and I'm going to stream it after you stop talking, so people can see it. The next sample.
Okay, so that is the
Peter Beatty. No, we talked about Peter Beatty. I think it was slide 3. You can go on quickly. 1 minute, maybe. Yeah.
I feel like we sort of overlapped on a couple of things. Level up when you're not an executive. Let me see which one you're showing on
Which
YouTube.
one is it? So now I am on, I think, slide 3. I am on slide 3 now, and then sorry, slide 3, and then there was slide 4, which is the end of it. Address foreign language of
pieces. Go to the one right above there, the one right before. People are dealing with specifically as immigrants. The immigrant journey takes a lot of grit. You all know it, and people recognize it, but if you don't sort of call it out, then the reader doesn't have a clue. And so if someone is dealing with that, I make sure to sort of reference it front and center. So in this example, I wrote at the very beginning of the summary at the top, I wrote, recent Venezuelan immigrant relied on to build solutions and solve complex problems that span industries. And then I listed the industries. I talked about how he'd been the CEO of 2 startups and an investment firm, that he had a talent for diverse team leadership, wearing multiple hats, CFO, COO, and CRO. So this person, sort of like what you were saying, he had come from a place where he had to be all things to all people, and he was targeting a role that would value that. And so, you know, when I wrote it was when the Venezuelan crisis was happening in full force, and the U.S. was accepting lots of immigrants. So just by calling it out, immediately you get that this person has been through a lot. I wrote that, and I sort of tried to embrace his leadership style, weaving in his immigrant story. So I wrote, champion a philosophy that when you care, work hard, and show up with passions, results follows. Overcome steep learning curves quickly to emerge as an expert. And then the last sentence I wrote was to close out the immigrant experience. I wrote, credit perseverance in a new country to natural curiosity, bold outreach, and a willingness to check your ego in at the door to grow and learn. Someone who reads that immediately, you know, if they don't never even look at the rest of the experience on their resume, they know this person has operated at the C-suite level. They know that they have worked in a place where ambiguity is probably happening, and they have to fly by the seat of their pants, and they know that they have a lot of grit and determination, which is what you want in a leader.
Okay, I'm going to add that onto the YouTube so people can see what we're talking about here. This is the resume she's talking about. So the resume that you're talking about, slide 3, Peter Brady? Yeah. Okay, the last one, IT experience one? Okay. All right. So that's the one. You can take a look at it. Okay, because this is all I have. Okay. Okay, that's okay. Oh, that one right there. Address immigrant journey right there. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so just quickly, 1, 2, 3. Okay, the slides we talked about it here. So I'm going to open the floor for a Q&A, and if anyone would like to come up on the stage and ask questions about the resume writing and executive resume writing, leadership writing, this is the moment for you. And if you don't have any questions, we're going to close it up. There are a lot of people from all around the world joining us. Thank you so much for joining in. Let me see. Let me give shout out to the people, regular listener who comes in all the time, and then give us this stage, like, so we can rave about it. Hey, so many people join in. So Arpreet, good to see you. He's a regular one right there. I see a lot of people. So if you have any questions, all you got to do is go raise your hand. It's at the bottom. And I cannot bring you up on the stage until you raise your hand. And that's how I can bring you up on the stage. That's how the audio live works. And if you missed it, Delaney, good to see you. If you missed this, you can go and watch the replay on my YouTube channel. Teach and Do. This is stream live in there as well. Monir, good to see you. And what you're going to do is you can go and subscribe for these kind of thing. Every Friday at 11, I go and then bring the guests such as Virginia so they can come and share the knowledge as a pro bono for free. How good is that? So Amit, I'm going to bring you up on the stage here. What are the questions that you have? I'm bringing you here, Amit. Where are you joining us from? What's the question that you have for us?
Hi, yes, I'm Amit Bhagwat and I'm joining from India. I have close to 22 years experience in technology recruitment. Okay. Now, in these 2 decades, I have recruited for India, US, and Canada market. Canada has been very, very small experience. However, what I wanted to understand, I as a recruiter, when I look for a job for myself, um, currently my resume is written in 3 pages. However, certain organizations want more, 4 pages, 5 pages, but then I myself feel like, oh, it's too much. But then some organizations also feel 3 pages is uh, too small. And I'm talking in terms of India market, right? And however, recruitment remains almost the same, irrespective of the country you work for. Um, so I wanted to understand, we as a recruiter, when we look for a job for ourselves, what should be on the resume and what should not be, and how much long it should be.
Oh, that's a great question. I think we're supposed to cover that, and we missed it. Thanks so much for bringing that questions right there. I have my own thing. Virginia, go for it. I'd love to hear from you. And
Yeah, so I don't write specifically for the India market, so I can't speak specifically to that. But what I will tell you is that certainly in IT, my husband hires in IT. He sees up to 7-page resumes, and sometimes it makes him crazy. Everyone is going to have opinions on this. What I always tell people is go with what 3 of the 5 of your trusted opinions have to say. The story needs to take as long as it takes, but if you focus on the last 15 years, you synopsize your earlier stuff and you write and you make sure that your experience talks about your achievements and your accomplishments and does not weave in responsibilities. It can be really, I don't think I've ever written a resume that's longer than 3 pages. You might have that person that says, well, I want to know more about this and more about that. And then you can give it to them. But that 3-page or 2-page resume is probably what caught their eye and made them call you. So I would say it worked and it served its purpose.
That's a great one. I really agree to it. So, and I have seen it. My husband is in IT field, and I remember when he was recruited. He worked in Canada and US both, and it all depends on the client, what they want. So recruiters have seen, like, he has submitted more than 7 pages because that's what their client wanted. And it was through Accenture, right? Like top companies, and that's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see all the skills and tech skills and everything. And some of them are, and my husband had like more than 15 years of experience on it. So, and I've seen my client as well who actually go to US to work as well under NAFTA treaty, because if you're Mexican, Canada, the names change now, but like they have gotten that as well, the request that their client, the employers want to see, like, so many pages of resume. And you're so right. My thing is, I'm not going to tell you to write the 7 pages, but you got to be preparing yourself. If, let's say, if that's a demand that job description is asking you for, if the recruiters and employers are asking you for. But I have not written any resume more than 3 pages, especially for executive. And if they have more than 15 years of experience, that's a valid thing. And sometimes, like, you have to showcase, where did he start from? How did he get promoted? It all depends on the job descriptions, in my opinion, as well, and what you bring in as well. And the story, if you capture everything in 2 pages, you don't have to go 4 pages, even 3 pages. My resume, like, if I were to go and apply for the role, I'd probably be applying for the senior leadership, let's say. My resume would only be 2 pages, and I can go up to 3 pages if I really wanted to, but I'd like to be sticking for myself to 2 pages only, but that may depend on the employer's ask and the job descriptions. If you want to go to colleges, university, public sector, you see a lot of job descriptions like 5 or 6 pages. Now, 2 pages, maybe not for you to write the 2 pages, work might not be enough for them. So this is how I see it. Do you need 3, 4, 5 sometimes if you're going to the public sector or academic institutions? So the answer is in the job description. So if you're missing out single details, you're trying to put everything in 9 font size, don't do that. What are your thoughts on the Virginia?
They're absolutely. And you brought up a good point. Universities, academia, if you want to be like a medical practitioner, that is a different style of document. That's actually a curriculum vitae. A lot of people in the US and Canada use the word resume and CV interchangeably, but actually they're very different.
Yeah.
The CV, you can go to 20 pages. You list every publication, every presentation you've ever done. But the resume is, I always say, it's your brochure. It's not your blueprint.
That is great. So could you please introduce yourself, pronounce your name correctly, where you are joining us from, and we're going to close this floor for everybody. Let us know where you're joining us from. You got to unmute it. Close this floor.
Yes, my name is Vladimir Maldonado.
Do you want to, I think YouTube is coming in. Are you watching YouTube as well? Do you want to stop that? Because there's an echo coming in. The YouTube, I think you just have to stop the YouTube and then ask question, because we can't hear you now. Go on.
Hello, do you hear me?
Perfect, yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, my name is Vladimir Maldonado, and I'm looking for a plant manager positions for the last 9 months. So I have some questions about the resume and what will be the best strategy with the resume in order to stand out of the crowd in these moments.
Where are you located?
In South Carolina.
Okay, so Virginia can address that. Virginia? YouTube, I think you just have to stop. I'm going to, so you're listening to YouTube. Thank you. I'm going to walk you through and maybe be in touch with Virginia a little bit later on as well. Virginia, do you have anything to add?
So it sounds like he lives very close to where I live. I wasn't really clear on what his question was specifically.
He said 9 months. It's been 9 months. What are the things?
9 months, plant manager. So if when someone has been looking 9 months, if you are out of work, if one of the challenges that people face is they need to sort of address the career gap. And if you have anything to show for that career gap, whether you maybe picked up a new certification or learned a skill or something like that, then you can certainly reference that in your resume. You should also explain why you lost your job. If you were part of a big layoff, sort of have one line that say, role ended this day. On LinkedIn, what you can do, because LinkedIn, you will show up lower in search if you appear to not be working. And so one technique that I use is I will say, I will leave the end date as present, but then in the job title, I'll list the exit date. That way the human reader sees that you're still employed. But the algorithm does not recognize that. But when you're targeting a plant manager role, you really need to speak about your leadership style. You need to show that you can work with people. If it's union or not union, that might be important. The job postings will direct you on what's important to include.
That's
and if you have
point.
experience from where you're from before, then if that is at all relevant to your target, you need to weave that in as well.
That's a great point. So job description with there's no one size fits all when it comes to resume. And this is where a lot of people go wrong when they're writing a resume. So if you're very clear on the targeted title and industry, chances are you might not have to update the resume all the time, just here and there, tweaking it. But my question to people is, if you're struggling with the resume writing, I want you to think about it. Are you clear on what you want? Think about this. If you're targeting that title and it's a different employer, job descriptions are not same. The demands are probably not the same. The hiring managers are not the same as well. So that's why you need to customize it. And when it comes to, I think, LinkedIn, Virginia, you got the good point. I think there was a talk about LinkedIn algorithm being biased to the people who had a gap on it. And I think they fixed it. Don't hold me to it, but I think they fixed it. And there's a way that I teach my client as well on LinkedIn as well. How do you go about correcting that career gap? And if anyone has a career gap right now, and to be honest, executive people really will suffer when it comes to a career gap. And I've seen there's a lot of gap because a lot of people are vetted out. There's a networking. Some people don't even post it depending on the industry. And this is why you might have a lot of gaps on it, especially with a niche talent. And there's a resume sample as well on my career gap YouTube as well. You can go and see it. It's go to my profile, experience sections on LinkedIn, and go to career break. I've updated that. And there's a blog, and I actually showcase the example of resume as well. How do you clarify the gap? What do you say, especially if you're laid off, whatever it is. And then you can also watch my YouTube channel. There's a tools that you can use it, flaunt it, because there's a reason you're on LinkedIn as well, right? So thank you so much for coming in, Virginia. Is there anything else that I have not asked or we have not talked about you want to add it at the end before we wrap this up?
I feel like you've covered it all. We've only have an hour. There's so much you could talk about, but I feel like we hit the highlights, and hopefully, and watching the YouTube replay with some of the hopefully some of the language that I shared can be used for people to adapt for their own situations.
All right. So everybody, thank you so much for joining in. I'm going to give shout out to the people who stayed in here, listened to us, give us a feedback. If you want us to come back with the resume writing tips, it was really not enough, and give you more sample, we'd be more than happy to collaborate once again in a couple of months or next year, whatever it is. Follow Virginia. She has a top podcast as well, and she talks about career, job search, and hire her for resume writing. If you are one of those who feel like I really can't brag about myself and I need the expert to write it, please go ahead and hire her as well. She is based out in US. So Parveen, Somel, Arpit, Susanna, I'm going to try pronouncing it. I do apologize in advance. Balaji, Sandeep, Kelly, Emmer, Kofi, Straifali, Munir, Juni, Samin, Chad, Amen, Samin, Chad, Amen, Sandeep, Sean, Daniela, Mukhtar, Dion, Abenda, Ted, Larsha, good to see you, Marian, Ranjan, Lisa, Sugandha, Nicole, Janetta, Celiona, Deepak, Sarfraz, Matthew, Stephen, Morgan, R. Chandra, and it's moving. Vishnu, Khalid, Shivam, Vladimir, Muhammad, Kamis, Sai, Deepthi, hey Samya, good to see you. Dinah, Nasir, Josna, Muhammad, Simon, Willie, Salma, oh my God, it's Amrish. Thank you. If I have missed anybody, I apologize. Jay, Mohammed, Kaji, thank you so much for coming in. Please do subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. If you want to watch a replay, this is available. We've shared some samples in there as well for you, so you can get an idea. Remember, there's no one size fits all. It's all about writing content which gets them attentions, not only about designing perfectly so it's eye-catching, it's about designing, making sure that it parses through the ATS, there's no error. Also, it's about the content, and this is what we do for a living. So we understand the market, and we also have a background from the hiring world as well. And Virginia, being a journalist, she knows what she's talking about. Thank you so much for coming in, Virginia. You take care, and everybody,
Thank you very much.
I am out.